welcome. Today we will continue to talk about security, because in a microservice landscape, we need to make sure that all of our little services are secure and tight. And last time we talked about bringing a strong facade using Azure API Management as a gatekeeper, and combine that with Auth0 to make sure that all our external users are authenticated and that our APIs are secure and well managed. So let's just look what's behind the scenes, and we will continue to use the same setup. So we'll continue that story. So let's go ahead and jump into the whiteboard and let's get started. So there we go. So the setup as we did, the strong facade setup was done with API management. And then we had Auth0, which is in the top. Then we created the consumer A, the blue one, that go ahead and went to Auth0 and got a token, and then they could use that token and connect to API management and actually connect to the resources behind it. So today we'll continue this, and just to go ahead and see what we're going to look into, behind API management, I actually have a function. So I have a function app. So this function is then actually calling a Cosmos DB, Cosmos, to get the data. But today we'll focus on the function and make sure that the function is really secure and as secure as it can be in our landscape. So if you have been working with Azure Functions before, you know that out of box we have security on it, but we will do a little bit more because we don't want any bad one. Or I don't know what they're called today. Those one who want to hack us, we don't want a hacker go ahead and go this way and start using our function that way. We don't want that, and that's what we're gonna go ahead and get even higher security level on. So we will do we can look into the function first, but we will do a two-layer approach to get this working. So let's just go ahead and look into the browser. And this is my function app. So out of box, I'm just using the functions security, which means that if I go into my functions and I go to get orders by customer, I can actually get the URL. So get the function URL. Let's go ahead and use that one. And if I use this one, I will get the key, this code, as you can see. And that code is actually going to make it possible to call this one. So let's just prove that first. So we can do the long run. We can go ahead and get a token. And we can then go ahead and from that token get my orders. This is then connecting via the API management instance as consumer A. Let's go ahead and just make sure that it works. There we go. We got orders. So if I'm then challenge this one a bit, I can actually copy this one. I can copy this URL, and we can see that we got a full URL and we got these curly brackets for a parameter. And let's go ahead and see for customer ID. So customer ID is 2 in this one. Let's go ahead and copy that. So let's just go ahead and go for 2. And let's go. There we go. 2. Send. And voila, I got the same result, which is actually not what I want. So let's go ahead and fix this. And let's start off with looking into our possibilities. So I'm using consumption based, which means that our possibilities is a little bit narrow. So let's just see what the docs says. So doc says for Azure Functions and the networking, I want to, so the security features of networking is for consumption plan, very bad. But if you go for premium, dedicated, ACE, or Kubernetes, you have all possibilities you have. But since I'm for consumption, I'm doing a serverless world, and I just want to go for consumption. I can actually do inbound restrictions and private site access. I have that possibility, which means that I can actually go ahead and set an IP, which I cannot go from. If that would be actually very possible for API management, but I'm also using consumption tier on my API management, which means that I don't have a static IP. if I would scale this up to a standard or basic, I would actually get a static IP, and I could add this IP restriction. Doing that would be then going back to my order again and go to networking. Where do we have networking? Here we go, networking. And this access restrictions, then I can go to configure access. Then I can add rules. So I can actually add a rule over here to make sure that only calls from a certain IP address would be allowed, which would be really good if I had a static IP, which I don't. So I will skip this one for now, but this could be used to get a second layer of security on your function, because then they need to have the code and they also need to have the correct IP. Fortunately for me, we have more options. So underneath the, let's go ahead back to this one. So inside of Azure, we have something called, in function apps, we have something called authorization and authentication, which means that we can add more or less a shell. We can add a layer of security over there, like the red one, and say that we need to have, there's several providers, but I would use Azure AD. We need to have Azure AD access in order to go ahead and access my function. So let's jump back to my function app. This is done via the Authentication and Authorization tab. Really simple, just click on. Action to take when a call is not authenticated. Well, I want them to log in. So I want them to have log in with Azure Active Directory, because that's the one I'm going to use. You could use any of these, and there's also a possibility today to use custom as well, which they don't have over here yet, but you can actually get it in. Let's go ahead and use Azure Active Directory, because I like to, even if I'm using, let's go back to this drawing again. So if I'm going to go ahead and do a blue line over here, just to make sure that we have inbound, outbound. So in this area, this is external and this is internal. So I want to make a distinction between this. So in this world, we have Auth 0, and in this world, we have Azure AD, which means that all communication inside of my internal world needs to be approved by Azure AD. Meanwhile, if I'm outside, as an outsider, I use Auth 0 as my provider. This could obviously be Azure B2B or Azure B2C as well, but this is my setup. So let's go ahead and lock our function in to make sure that I'm not going to be able to go ahead and get data with just the code. So let's start off with that. We need to configure this one. So let's go in and press the configure. And I'm going to do express because I don't really that much. And I'm just going to create a new one. It's going to have the same name as my function app, which is okay for me. Could be good to have others. Let's just go ahead and create that one. And let's press save. Now this will create up, and we will be able to see this application come up in the AD as well. So we will be able to go ahead and as soon as it's, oh, there we go, it's up already. So there we go, we got our function app and we got our application client ID up and running. So then we should be set. Let's go ahead and try this one again. Let's go ahead and just press send. Let's see. I'm hoping that it's not gonna work. It's not working because I don't have access. And let's go ahead and make sure that we are still working over here, right? Oh, I need to fix that. So let's go back to my drawing again. So now we have locked our function in. We need to have a token from Azure AD, and we need to have this code from our function to be able to access this. We need to get that from our API Management instance. So I'm going to use something called MSI, Microsoft Service Identity. So I'm going to add this one. So I'm going to add MSI to this call. That sounds like a good idea. So my API Management instance can actually get an identity inside of Azure. So it's more like, it's actually like giving a person, but we give this to a resource, which means that we can give access to different things based on the resource, which is awesome. So let's just jump into our API management instance and check how that is looking. So in API management, I can actually then have something called the managed identity. I have pre-created this one. So I have created one of these. This just click next, more or less. You can also user assign, but I used a system assign. So I have a user. So this is my Azure, my API management user inside of Azure. So if I want to use this one, I can actually go ahead and let's just go to authentication policies in Azure. So in Azure API Management. In API Management, we have a few authentication policies we can use when we want to access backend resources with a standard authentication. They are basic. They are client certificates, and it's this managed identity. And that's the one I'm looking for. So if I'm going to go ahead and I'm not aware if you know all the steps, but if I'm gonna, let's go ahead and let's do this. Let's just add the Azure AD. Let's go ahead and add Azure AD. So what I need to do now is that I need from my API management instance, go ahead over here, get a token back, and I need to use that token when I call my function. That token needs to be able to have access to that function as well. So I need to request that with the scope of my function. That's what I need to do. And fortunately, we have this policy, authenticate managed identity. So this one we're gonna go ahead and use. So let's go ahead and let's just copy this one, or we can just go ahead and see some examples. So here we can see very easy. And we can use to set the header, but we just use the managed identity. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm gonna go back. There we go. There's my API management. Let's go to my APIs. And since I was using my order API, I will go into that one, version 1. I will go to get my orders, and I will go to policies. So there we go. And so this is actually validating the incoming call. This is setting the variable names. We're gonna go set the backend service, and we can just go ahead off the backend service. We can go ahead and paste this policy. Okay, let's go ahead. We don't want to ignore errors. We want to have them out. We don't need a variable, so we will remove that. And we will let's go ahead. Client ID of user assigned identity. Let's go ahead. I'm just needing the resource because this is just set. I'm not using an assigned one. Let's go ahead. So this resource needs to be the client ID of my function app. So, oops. So let's go ahead and go into this one, and I can actually go in here. And we can see, okay, I need to go over here. So I need the client ID. I need this one. I need this ID. I'm going to copy this ID. And I will go back to my API management instance, and I'll paste that one over there. So now I've added the policy to actually grant my identity as my API management, and I'm going to go ahead and grant access to my function. So let's save this one. That's good. Let's go back to Postman, and let's just go ahead and try this out. Dun, 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 dun. Let's see. This sounds promising. This looks promising. It's taking some time. It needs to go ahead and take the round trip, getting back to world and doing all the stuff. It needs to go to get to the token and everything. Let's go back. Oh, let's see. We're back online. I can now request this via API management because I had my token generated from the policy. So the policy was created and the token was added to my request back to the function, and therefore I got access. If I go and test this again, the one that I did behind the scenes, and I'm going to go up, press send, I will still get my error. So I have fixed this one. Awesome. So a fast request recap. Sorry. My API management instance now has an identity. So I have an identity in my Azure AD, which means that I can then get a token to grant access to my function, which also is an identity. As we saw over here, we can find this one we can find this in the AD. This is an application nowadays. So we also have an identity. So I can actually go ahead and say, hey, can I visit this one? Yes, I can. And then I get the token, and then I can request my function. And my function now has a 2-layer security, and we are more secure than earlier. So this is how you set up a second layer of security from your API management to your Azure function with Azure AD, and using policies from API management and built-in security on Azure Functions. So we have, without any code at all, besides the snippet based on the policy inside of API management, we have added a second layer of security on top of our function, which means that we now have a much more secure environment. Awesome. That's all for me today. I hope you enjoyed it. Give me a comment, give me a like. Have you suggesting for more content? Please let me know. Otherwise, take care and stay safe. Cheers. Bye.